Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Sometimes All It Takes to See Is to Look. This will be Part 6, Chapter 6, entitled At Long Last, It's the Reckoning. The talk with Midoriya went well, and much longer than Shouta honestly expected. He would have to put off talking to Bakugo until the next day, unless he wanted to make a home visit, but that is not a good option, especially since it would be such short notice. So tomorrow it is. For now, however, he needs to talk with Nezu and schedule the meeting with Midoriya's mother. Speaking of, what is up with her? She is obviously greatly loved by her son, but it seems that she has caused some unhealthy mindsets in him, and he doesn't feel like he can confide in her, all while she wants to protect him from the world. Shouta runs through what he can see in Midoriya through his head, doesn't rely on others, self-blame, low self-esteem, afraid of rejection. It seems like hyper-focused helicopter parenting stemmed from anxiety that's led to emotional neglect. She appears to be giving way to her anxieties and not seeing where her child needs help, based on what Midoriya said. And it doesn't help that her husband is absent either. Most likely she doesn't even realize that what she's doing is harmful. She's likely just too focused on protecting him, which can be harmful if it goes overboard. Shouta sighed. He was not looking forward to his discussion with Midoriya's mother. He stands from where he is still sitting in his office and heads to meet with Nezu. He knocks on the door and it opens automatically with a chirpy, "Come in." He sits across from Nezu's desk as the Chimera prepares him some tea. "Ah, Aizawa-kun, how did your meeting with Midoriya-kun go?" Shouta almost rolls his eyes. He just knows that Nezu had probably been watching over the surveillance system. It went about as expected. Nezu claps his paws together. "Good, good." His expression darkens to an almost canine snarl. "So, have you decided what to do about Bakugo?" Shouta feels his face morphing into an almost similar state. Midoriya was adamant about not expelling him, but he has a scar from illegal quirk usage. That's means for arrest, not just expulsion. Nezu's paw goes over the mark cutting through his eye, a reminder of his dark past. Shouta knows Nezu will not let Bakugo get away with his abuse, past or not. Shouta purses his lips. "Maybe we could expel him anyways." Nezu's nose twitched. "I should think not, unfortunately. Aside from the fact that he could potentially be targeted as a former UA student, he also has potential for villainy, given his past actions. We don't need to be the tipping point that pushes him to pursue greatness in those means." Quite regrettably, Shouta agreed. He tipped his head to the side. Midoriya mentioned that Bakugo was never told what he was doing was wrong, and that he has gotten calmer since starting at UA. I can see where he has changed since the first week, but if he's staying, he's going to need some serious interference and support. Nezu nods in agreement, and they discuss some more ideas for what they plan to do for Bakugo's punishment when the topic of Midoriya's mother pops up. He didn't want her to be told about anything, said he didn't want to worry her because she was already stressed. He puts on a tiny scowl. She never noticed the bullying, even though it was physical. Midoriya also mentioned some concerning thoughts that seemed to stem from his mother's words. Nezu tapped a paw to his chin, snout, and thought. What sort of concerning thoughts? That he was fragile because he was assumed quirkless. I'm guessing a mix of emotional neglect and some cosseting that stemmed from her thinking he was weak and overlooking his emotions because of her own worry. Shouta's scowl deepens. It had negative effects on Midoriya, plus the bullying and the neglect from teachers. It's a bad mix. He pauses for a moment before tumbling through his thoughts. Nezu listened attentively as Shouta rambled, ears twitching occasionally. He also mentioned that she worked a lot and wasn't around often. I don't think there's any other types of neglect going on, since he seems to really love her, and is healthy physically. It's possible she just has to work a lot because of her absent husband, but I don't want to rule out the possibility that she was neglecting him by avoiding interaction. Nezu gave Shouta a contemplative look before replying. I suppose you will have to see when you meet Midoriya-san. Maybe a home visit would be beneficial. Without Midoriya-kun, of course. Nezu was already logging into his computer. Of course. Excellent. The tapping of the keyboard alerted Shouta to a message being written. How does during your break period tomorrow sound? Shouta furrowed his brow. We'll need to check if Midoriya-san has work then. Nezu smiled cheekily, canines glinting dangerously. I already checked her work schedule, and she's free all day until 3. Shouta grinned back. He should have known the rat would do something like that. He didn't even know where she worked. Sounds perfect. More tapping, and the email was sent with a flourish. I'll let you know if she agrees, to which I have no doubt. Nezu tilted his head, eyes glinting as he saw something on his computer screen. You've yet to meet with Bakugo-kun, correct? Yes. The meeting with Midoriya went longer than I expected. A small hum as Nezu replied. Well, it would seem you're in luck. He's still using one of our on-facility gyms. You can catch him at Gym Gamma if you hurry. Shouta raised an eyebrow and nodded, standing abruptly. I'll take my leave, then. Nezu simply raised a paw in dismissal, and Shouta walked out the door. Shouta meets Bakugo right as he exits the gym, blonde spikes damp and a towel slung over his shoulders from a post-workout shower. When he catches sight of Shouta, his red eyes narrow considerably. Bakugo, what are you doing here so late? Shouta fights to keep his voice even. The kid has the gall to scoff, crossing his arms. I was working out, obviously, sensei. Shouta's eye twitches at the attitude, but he supposes it's helpful that he caught Bakugo today, so he lets it slide. Fine, but since you're still here, there's something I need to discuss with you. His student's eyes narrow even more. If that were even possible, a scowl graced his lips. Whatever. What for? Shouta beckons him back to the main building. This won't take too long. Let's go to my office. He hears Bakugo scoff again, but follow him anyway. At least he has some respect for Shouta. Not much as a teacher, but more so as a pro-hero. They are settled in Shota's office, Bakugo taking the couch and Shouta himself settling in the armchair for the second time that day, about to have yet another difficult conversation. Bakugo gets comfortable on the couch, leaning back and sticking his legs out, crossed at the ankle. He sits exactly the opposite of how Midoriya did in the same seat. Where Midoriya made himself smaller, Bakugo spreads out, taking up as much space as possible. Shouta sat simply with his arms crossed, loosely over his chest. So why the frick am I here? I haven't done anything. Bakugo almost looks smug, like he's expecting to be praised. That won't do at all. Shouta fixed his student with a withering gaze and watched as his smirk slowly fell off his face, replaced with apprehension and mild anger, which seemed to be a common occurrence with this particular student. Might as well get straight to the point. I want to discuss your relationship with Midoriya, specifically what occurred in middle school. Bakugo's face shifted to disbelief, eyes widening slightly before he hit it with more anger and arrogance. What about the stupid nerd? Nothing freaking happened in middle school. He crossed his arms in defiance, not making eye contact with Shouta. He could feel his mask of indifference slipping at that blatant lie. Nothing happened, Shouta says in a deadly quiet. So you didn't bully him almost every day for years. Bakugo tensed at the tone and the implications, yet he still feigned insolence. What did that useless scrub tell you? He didn't tell me until I cornered him. I went to your middle school because I was concerned about his behavior. What behavior? He says with an eye roll. That goody two-shoes get into trouble or something. Shouta can feel his already persistent frustration with Bakugo building. No. His learned skittishness, among other things. Shouta tilted his head in a way that he knew came off as menacing. Learned from years of bullying, perhaps. A disbelieving scoff. Ollie roughed him up a little. He deserved it anyways. And why's that? Shota's voice was level, but his eyes were narrowed into contemptuous glare. Bakugo scoffed for the umpteenth time. He was a quirkless Deku, obviously. Shouta couldn't hide the emotions boiling beneath his skin. His quirk flared, eyes flashing red on red as he met Bakugo's gaze. He leaned forward, causing Bakugo to lean back slightly in response. So being quirkless is an excuse to abuse someone. Bakugo's head flinched back, aghast, and he stood abruptly. I didn't abuse the nerd. I told you already I taught the little freak his place. Shouta pursed his lips and leaned back again, to which Bakugo plopped back down, relaxing a little at the created distance. Oh? And how would you describe abuse, then? Bakugo's features twisted, and he opened and shut his mouth a few times before replying. It's like when a parent hits their kid. I didn't do that. Shouta brought a hand up to rub his temple. This was getting nowhere. How was Shouta supposed to make a student understand? He took a moment to study Bakugo. He was slouching almost carelessly, but he had a conflicted look on his face. There was something almost unrecognizable flickering behind his crimson eyes. Bakugo, Shouta looked directly at his student, forcing him to make eye contact with a piercing gaze. What you did classifies as abuse. Bakugo tenses, a small frown wavering behind the angry scowl. Long-term physical and verbal bullying. Shouta leans forward once again, clasping his hands together. He needs to get this point across. If Bakugo fails to understand what he's done is wrong, then he doesn't deserve to be a hero. Midoriya has a scar from you using your quirk on him, you know. Bakugo's brows crease, and he scoffs lightly without real hostility. So what? You gonna expel me? Shota's astounded at the parallels between his two students. But they have known each other for a long time. It only makes sense they might be somewhat similar, underneath their completely opposite personalities. That's up to you, and how cooperative you plan on being. Shouta leans back in his seat. You need to understand what you did was wrong, in every sense of the word. Bakugo's gaze flicks around the room, and he recrosses his arms. I get it, he grumbled under his breath. Shouta clenched his jaw. He was done with his petulant act. No, Bakugo. His student jumped at the sudden harshness in Shota's tone. You need to understand. Do you know the effects on a person's mental state that being bullied and degraded like they're less than human for years can cause? Midoriya has no self-esteem to think of. He's untrusting of authority because they never stopped you. And he's self-sacrificial to the point where it's almost suicidal. But he's willing to get help in order to become a hero, which he will be great at, even though no one believed in him until UA. Shouta narrowed his eyes at Bakugo, who looked like he was attempting to sink into the couch. If you don't feel any remorse for what you helped cause, then I can't say you have any potential for heroism. His student simply blinked at him, eyes widened in fear at Shota's proclamation. After a moment of looking at each other in silence while Bakugo appeared to seriously think about it, he straightened in his seat. I know what I did was wrong. I get it, I really do, Frick, I don't know why I did it, okay? He clenched his jaw and clenched his hands tightly into fists. Deku's just... He was always so heroic, even though he was weak. It was annoying as hell. I thought it was what he needed since he was too weak to be a hero without a quirk. Shota's brows furrow at that, but Bakugo doesn't seem to notice. It just became a habit, I guess. No one ever stopped me either. Those freaking teachers just watched. You're the first one who ever stopped me, you know. Bakugo drags a heavy hand down his face. Being here, I get it now, okay? I was a dumb freaking kid who beat the crap out of someone who didn't deserve it. He looked through his hand with a piercing red eye, waiting for Shota's response. Shouta pondered for a moment. During his discussion with Nezu this afternoon, they both agreed that they would expel Bakugo if he didn't show remorse, risky or not. They couldn't keep someone who couldn't regret hurting someone like he did. It seems like he does regret it, and that UA is somewhat to help for that, given how terrible Aldera Middle School was to both of them. While Bakugo is in the wrong, he's not the only one at fault for his behavior. Yes, he should have understood it was wrong. But if you were told it's okay for your whole life, it gets hard to break out of that egotistical mindset. Shouta let a loud puff of air out, getting Bakugo's attention. Fine. I can work with that answer. Bakugo looks at him warily, dropping his hand to the side. So, am I being expelled or not? Shouta grits his teeth. Hopefully, what he was about to implement would help with his atrocious attitude as well. No, I am not expelling you. Bakugo visibly relaxed at that. But you are not getting off scot-free. His student simply clenched his jaw and nodded. Shouta crossed his arms and relaxed his face to his usual deadpan as he stared down at his student. First of all, we're going to set up a meeting with your parents. Bakugo let a displeased expression slip onto his face. Problem with that? Shouta raised an eyebrow. The blonde merely gritted his teeth tighter and ground out a harsh, No, it's fine. Shouta nodded, pleased with that response. Good. So, meeting with the parents. We're also going to sign you up for anger management therapy, which you will attend twice a week. He paused to gauge his student's reaction, but there was only the clenching of fists and rigidity of his spine. If your therapist can't see you making any progress over a reasonable time period, we may add more appointments. If you do so on purpose or are uncooperative, you will be immediately expelled. We are also prohibiting you from contacting Midoriya in any way until your therapist clears you. If you make any violent interactions with him, you will be immediately expelled. If you use your quirk outside of training, you will have to wear quirk-suppressing cuffs until cleared by your therapist. If you use your quirk on any student outside of training, you will be immediately expelled. Shouta paused, reaching the most potentially upsetting condition to his continued enrollment. Bakugo sat stiffly on the couch, hands clenching and unclenching, in an obvious attempt to quell his urge to let out an explosion. You will also be transferring to Class 1B, starting tomorrow. What? Bakugo leapt from his seat. Shouta could tell he's just barely holding off an explosion, given the small wisp of smoke coming from his palms. Shouta shoots a quirk-fueled glare at him, cutting off the smoke and prompting his student to sit. Remember what I just said about quirk usage? Bakugo grinds his teeth, eye twitching. Yes, Sensei. He forces through the clenched teeth. Good. You should know there's a reason for putting you in a separate class, but be glad we didn't transfer you to general studies. Midoriya was adamant that you would make a wonderful hero, but it isn't healthy for either of you to be around each other, so Class 1B. Hopefully it would also teach him not to take advantage of having friends in 1A, seeing how he always claimed they weren't actually his friends. Do you agree with these terms? Bakugo pursed his lips, twisting them into a begrudging scowl. Yes. Shouta nodded tersely. Good. I will be in contact with your parents soon to set up a meeting to inform them of the situation. You are expected to be there as well. He cocked his head to the side and glanced unwaveringly at resigned crimson eyes. You may show up to Class 1B tomorrow. Everything is already set up. He actually had to think about this, but Nezu thought that transferring Monoma to 1A would probably be the best choice, given his aversion to Shota's class. Hopefully he would be able to learn something from this situation as well. Nezu decided to be the one to contact the student and tell him of the transfer, so he was already in the loop come Tuesday. And while they were on the topic of transfers, Shouta petitioned to remove Mineta from his class and switch him with Shinso and Gen Ed, given Mineta's insistent, inappropriate behavior. Nezu agreed, but thought it best to wait some time after Monoma's transfer, as to not overwhelm his class. But Shouta digresses. Bakugo stood stiffly, from the couch, grabbing his backpack with tight knuckles. Shouta stood as well and guided his now ex-student to the door. He held it open, and as Bakugo walked out, Shouta called out to him. Remember, Bakugo, your actions have consequences. We won't tolerate any more of your disrespect and violent behavior. His student had paused his walking, back facing Shouta. But you still have potential to be a hero. Take this opportunity to learn. Be better. Shouta promptly went back inside and shut his door. And if he heard near-silent sniffles through a door for a minute before the sound of receding footsteps, he wouldn't tell anyone. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 6 of Sometimes All It Takes to See Is to Look. Chapter 7 will be up next. Hope you all are still enjoying this fic. Let me know your thoughts and reactions, and as always, thank you so much for listening.